there is a world out there that we cannot communicate with, we can't see, we can't touch, we can't feel. And a lot of the evidence of that was in the scripture when it talks about what we commonly refer to as heaven and hell. So the terms in scripture are Sheol, Hades, lake of fire, Abaddon, the pit, Gehenna, the abyss, Tartarus, and hell. That's the bad news part of it. The good news part of it is it's also refers to Paradisio, bosom of Abraham, third heaven, and New Jerusalem. Are these terms familiar to you guys?
No.
Somewhat.
No?
I've heard of some of them, but I've never heard of Abaddon or
Abaddon?
Gehenna.
No?
Abaddon or Gehenna. And I'm not sure I've heard of Tartarus either.
Yeah, you're not different. That's pretty much what everybody usually says. So let's get into it. First of all, Sheol and Hades are the same place. One is the Hebrew and the other is the Greek. So it's obviously the Old Testament and the New Testament. Sheol and Hades refer to a place where the righteous and the unrighteous go. Now this is Old Testament now, okay? So in the Old Testament, which was prior to the Messiah, prior to Yeshua coming and doing his saving work for us, that when people died, they went to this area below called Sheol, and it was also referred to in the New Testament as Hades. Now there are yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this where the Catholic faith gets their idea of purgatory?
No.
From a place where the righteous and the unrighteous go?
No.
Okay.
No, I'll get into that one for you. That's a different thing. Okay,
okay.
This is Old Testament Jew. Yeah, when the Old Testament Jew, when they talked about death, they expected to go there. Okay, so this is where the righteous and the unrighteous, because there's compartments there, and there's the scripture you can look up. It was a more dreadful place for the unbeliever, obviously. Different compartments and levels. The direction of the place was always referred to as downward, and it's a place of consciousness. Some people's concept and some of the Old Testament Jews' concepts was that there was soul sleep. You may have heard that term before. That you would not be aware of where you were. It was not removed from God's jurisdiction, and it was a temporary place, not an eternal place. Hades in the New Testament is the same as Sheol in the Old Testament, the place for the righteous and the unrighteous. It has two main compartments as Hades. Hades proper and Abraham's bosom. Now, Hades proper, I'll show you on the chart in a minute, is where the bad news side, and Abraham's bosom is the good news side. Although both believers and unbelievers were there, it was especially severe for unbelievers. Same thing, Hades was downward, temporary, place of consciousness. Okay? Now, in the same vernacular, Abaddon, it was a term that was also used. It's a word, Hebrew word that means destruction. It's also found interestingly enough, in the Bible as the name of the demon who holds the key to hell. Okay. And it's paralleled with Sheol in 3 of the 7 usage of it. It's only, the only talk about it or mention of it is in a negative fashion. And it's the Hebrew name for the unrighteous side. The pit is the name for the unrighteous portion with Sheol or Hades also. And it's a negative term. It's an Old Testament term. And it's the name that refers to the unseen world from the standpoint of punishment is concerned. Yeah, just hang on and I'll get, I'm just going through the terms. Then I got a chart I'll show you that hopefully will help you correct it. Also, the term abyss is rooted in the concept of the netherworld or a bottomless area. It has 9 passages in the New Testament. It's a Greek word. And it is never associated with human beings. See, in the Old Testament and in the vernacular of Hades and Sheol, there are actually 3 compartments. Okay, and the abyss is one, Tartarus is another, and I'll talk about the other in a minute. Now, Tartarus, which you have not heard of, is the Greek term. It's mentioned in 2 Peter 2:4. It's mentioned also in Jude 6-7, and it is about Genesis 6. And Tartarus is the place where angels that were in the time of Noah, that's where they go. There's a special place for them because there was a special sin for them. And that special sin for them was the sin of breeding, marrying and breeding with women and trying to pollute the bloodline to screw up the Messiah bloodline that was to come. So this was Satan's attempt and effort. The fallen angels took human bodies and they mated with the women, and the children that were born for them were very large, muscular people who physically dominated in that time. So these guys are one of the reasons why Noah's ark and flood came about. It was to remove them from the face of the earth and begin again with righteous people. Okay? All right, now this hopefully will help you. This is a chart. It lays out on the left side is the unrighteous, and on the right side would be the righteous. Now, keep in mind this, okay? There. First of all, there is no word in the Hebrew or the Greek for hell. So the word hell does not appear in the scriptures. It is referred to in these terms that I've got laid out for you, Sheol and Hades to begin with, which is the general term for what we refer to as hell. And on the unrighteous side, there's Abaddon and the pit. Abaddon is the proper name for that area, and the pit was a descriptive name for the area. So of that, there's 3 compartments. There's the abyss, there's Tartarus, and there's Hades proper. The abyss is where fallen angels go. That's where the demons reside. Tartarus is where what was referred to as the sons of God. which was these bad guy angels that bred with women. And Hades proper is where the unsaved Old Testament people, that's where they went. And it was used in the descriptions of that they were shades. That means they were shadows. So there was no physical body there. These are all spirits, right? On the positive side of it is what was referred to as Paradisio, or Abraham's bosom. Now, you remember in Scripture, there's a parable that is told, a story that's told about Lazarus dying, and in that he spoke with a guy who was in hell, and there was a chasm, which is what I show as this white area, the space between the two. A chasm existed between the two. The idea being that this guy that was in hell, Hades proper, was saying, I just want a drop of water on my tongue, and go tell my brother and my family where I am, so that they won't to be like me and end up here. Do you recall that in the Scripture anywhere, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Paradisio is also the place where Jesus took the thief on the cross. He said, today you will be with me in paradise. This is what he was referring to. Do you recall that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And now, before I move on from this slide, this is the way it was set up between Adam and Jesus' ascension. This is how the righteous and the unrighteous were dealt with. Now, Norris, back to your comment. Nowhere in here do you see any opportunity or any reference to purgatory, right?
Right, right.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Did you have a question? You had your hand up.
Yeah. Was this setup or this diagram that you've got here? Was this something that was fairly well known by religious people at the time of that Jesus walked on the earth? Was this sort of the understanding of the Jewish scholars and the Greek scholars as far as what they knew of the Jewish religion and stuff like that? Was this sort of well known throughout the general population?
Well, it was known. I don't think it was well known. Okay, but
Okay.
it was known, and it was known because these terms that I'm using here are their terms out of the Old Testament Hebrew. So,
Okay.
you know, if they're in there, then they were there because somebody put them there, and they read them, talked about them.
Now,
Yeah.
is this from Adam to Ascension? Is that the name of a title of a book, or where
it's a
did this
time
information?
This is the time frame. Where did this information come from?
Right.
Is that what
right.
you asked me?
Yes. Yes.
Let me go back, and you see all these scriptures that I've got in there for your references.
Okay.
You see all
put
those?
this together, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. I'm
But you
impressed.
see these scriptures here. You can go look them up. Hey, test me. Check it out, man. Don't trust me.
No, I will. I intend to. I think this is incredible.
I mean, they're all there. So here's the thing about it. That you can believe this. I am not smart enough to make this stuff up. Okay. Right. So you don't have to worry about it coming from me. Right. I'm a detective of going through the Bible. That's where I get this information. Okay. So this is the time frame of this existing. See, the reason why I'm telling you this is because the paradise and the Abraham's bosom, that no longer exists. That's not there anymore. And the reason it's not there anymore is that the Old Testament saints, those who were deemed as righteous, they were not destined for punishment. They were not destined to be sent to Abaddon or the pit. So there had to be an area for them to go to. They were not allowed in heaven because the price, the redemption for the sin had not happened. So this had to be a temporary place until the Messiah came and died on the cross, paid the price. At that time, heavens opened up, and we as saints now benefit from that, because absent the body, present with the Lord. So we go directly to heaven. But in the meantime, there had to have been a holding area waiting for the Messiah to come. Now, in the scripture also, it tells you that Jesus, during the 3-day period where his body was in the grave, that his spirit, it describes it as going to hell or Hades. Well, this is where he went. He went to Abraham's bosom. And he went there, obviously to take the thief on the cross with him, but he went there. It tells you that, and the term is that he preached to the captives. These were people that were being held there because they were waiting for the Messiah to come. And he was making that announcement to them that it was time for them to be going to heaven and be in a more permanent environment. Now, the irony of this is, and the parable that we see, or the story we see in the New Testament about Lazarus being in this area, is that they could hear and see across this gulf, but they couldn't cross that gulf. They couldn't pass the impassable gulf. So all the people and the demons and the unsaved that were in the pit and the Abaddon, they would hear Jesus speaking to these people in Paradiso, in Abraham's bosom, therefore further tormenting them that he truly was who he said he was, and that they've lost out on that.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay. I maybe I wasn't listening, but when Jesus died on the cross and told the thief that you will today you will be with me in paradise, you're saying that this was Abraham's bosom that he was claiming that's where the thief was going to go, correct? In other words, he was going to be with Jesus in heaven. But the time before he was resurrected, where was Jesus on this chart?
He was in paradise for a while. How long, I don't know.
So he wasn't in Hades proper for the 3 days.
No.
Wow. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm amazed.
Well, listen up. You see that up here where it says Hades and Sheol?
Right.
That's a general term for all of that. You get it? So
I'm seeing what you're saying. Yeah.
What I'm saying to you is that when the scripture says that Jesus went to Hades, which some translators use the loose term hell, he actually did, but he went to a compartment, an area of that which housed or which collected the righteous or the saved saints. He did not go to this area on the left, the area of punishment. He went to the area where the Old Testament believers, the Old Testament righteous, were being held. not held, but gathered. Do you follow me there?
Well, where do people on this chart go who don't believe in Jesus when they die? Are you saying that they also go down on the right-hand side to Abraham's bosom, or do
No,
they
no,
go?
Norris. You see where it says Hades proper? What
Yes.
is that term under Hades proper? What does it say under Hades proper?
Unsaved Old Testament people.
Yeah, is that the people you were asking about?
I was asking about unsaved people in general,
what that-
today's date.
Wait a minute. We're not talking about today. Remember, this is from Adam to the ascension.
Okay, all right. I'm getting the. So this is historical. What we're describing now. Okay,
Yeah, I'm trying to bring you up to current.
up to date. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry for the interruption.
No, it's not an interruption. That's what we're here for.
Or the people
Anybody
that are
else?
waiting.
Huh?
I have a question.
Yeah.
The people that are waiting to go, are they in paradise then? I mean, what are they doing in there?
What are they doing in there?
Yeah.
I have no idea what they were doing in there.
I wonder if they were in paradise then.
The term was paradise. It was let's just phrase it as a happy place, but it did not have the presence of God. That's the difference between here and heaven. God was in heaven.
Yeah.
Right? And the reasons why they were not allowed into the presence of God is because of sin.
Right.
Price, the redeeming price for sin had not been paid yet. So when Jesus came and Jesus died on the cross, right, that was paying the price for them.
Mhm.
But what it lacked was a formal declaration of acceptability by the Father before they were able to be released. All right. So Jesus went down to tell them that they were going to be released. And they do get released. And when he ascends into heaven, he takes them with him.
Mhm.
So when he takes them with him, that vacates, that cleans out that entire place. So there were no more people in paradise, in Abraham's bosom. So since there was no people in there and there was nobody going to be further sent there, then it ceased to exist because everybody went to heaven. Jesus had paid the price. They were now in heaven and they were with him and they were not going to be separated from him. So Abraham's bosom ceased to exist.
Dan,
Yeah.
when during the rapture,
Yeah.
I thought that during the rapture that the Old Testament saints were the first to rise. Am I
Okay,
wrong?
now wait a minute. Wait a minute. Listen to me. This is their spirit. That has nothing to do with their bodies, okay?
Okay.
These are all spirits right here.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay.
What's going to happen is that as I go through, I'll show you eventually the spirits are going to be reunited with bodies. Both of them, both the unrighteous and the righteous. And what's going to happen is that the unrighteous torment will then be extended to physical punishment. Right now, the torment is spiritual.
Dan, are you saying that they're going to have a new body? It's not going to be their old body that they're going to be given.
It's not. Why would it not be?
Oh, what about people that were burned or cremated?
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is you don't think God could recreate that body?
Oh no! If it, well, yeah, he could. I just didn't know if that was the deal. I thought maybe we
Yeah,
get, they talk about a new body.
you're going to get your body in a glorious state. It'd be a glorified body. You know, Jesus, when he ascended, I mean, when he came out of the grave, when he rose and came out of the grave, that was his body, except it was then glorified,
All
which
right, I got it.
means it's a little different. I mean, you know, now we're into discussion about the corpus delicti. You know, we're talking about, well, what's it happened? Jesus ate, but he didn't eat because he needed nourishment. He ate to show them evidence that was his body, because he says spirits don't eat that all. So I'm eating with you guys so you'll know that this is me. This is really me. You remember that?
No, I don't remember hearing that, but I'm sure that
Okay.
you're correct.
All right. So hell is a Teutonic root word. It means to hide or to cover. And there, as I said, there's no reference to it. It's just a colloquialism, let's put it that way, that we've learned to use over centuries of time. Okay, now here is where we're the same chart advanced one step. And the advance of one step is that the people in the Abraham's bosom are being prepared to go to heaven. Over here on the other side, this group is now being formed to eventually be thrown into the lake of fire at the final judgment after 1,000 years of messianic reign. Okay. Now we're getting to a more permanent place. And the reference in scripture, and there's the references, you can look them up yourself, is Gehenna is the term that's used, and that's a Greek word. Although the concept of Gehenna is Hebrew, the actual word that's used in scripture is Greek. And Gehenna actually comes from a Hebrew term, Gia Hinnom, which means the valley of Hinnom. There was an actual physical place outside of Jerusalem called the Valley of Hinnom, and it was the trash dump. It was the garbage dump for the city. And people would carry their garbage out there, and it would be burned up. And the way they did it was they just put it on the fire and just covered up with dirt. So you can imagine all of the people that were doing that. Over a period of time, it would be a lot of smoldering that would be going on under the dirt. It would be burning constantly. They would throw dead bodies in there. There's evidence in scripture where the sacrifices of the people in Jerusalem, they put their babies in there to sacrifice them to the idols. To give you an idea, and I've used this before, in Pennsylvania, there is a place where there were a number of coal mines that were abandoned and sealed up, and through negligence on someone's part, they ignited one of those abandoned mines, which ran to other abandoned mines. So there has been underground in Pennsylvania a fire that has been burning for 60 years. So if you can picture that, you can look that up in Google and get that in your mind. That's this place. It's a fire that never goes out. It's a worm that never dies.
Dan, in
Now,
the Bible,
yeah.
When Judas gave the silver back to the Pharisees, and then they renamed that piece of property, the field of blood. Was that referring to the same area? Because I thought that was more around a little bit more to the east or whatever it is, or south of.
I don't really know. I haven't heard that, Tom. I don't know. I know that this is the valley that winds around. Yeah, I believe it is east of the city, and it winds around and ties into the west of the city.
It
So
does.
it's a pretty large area.
Yeah, yeah, and they also, but today, the valley's down there at the bottom, but just at the bottom of the valley, coming up the side of towards the Mount of Olives and all of that, is a cemetery. It's
Oh, really?
filled with
Oh, wow.
tombs.
Wow. Okay. This is also known as the eternal abode of the lost. It is referred to also as the lake of fire, and it's the same thing, and it's the permanent place for punishment. In the lake of fire, the term lake of fire only appears 4 times, and that's all in Revelation. It is referred to as the second death. Now, Scripture tells us that both death and Hades are cast into the lake of fire. Hades being here, this section, will no longer exist, because everything that's in here and every body that's in here and every spirit that's in here will be cast into the lake of fire. So just as when everybody vacated Abraham's bosom and went to heaven, when all of these are vacated and they go to the lake of fire, it no longer will exist. So Norris, this is your temporary holding area going to the permanent area, which is this area, which is the lake of fire in Gehenna.
Okay. And again, we're just talking about now the time period up until Jesus' ascension. And I know you covered this, but it just didn't stick. Where are the Old Testament saints now?
They're in heaven.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Now this diagram is from the ascension to eternity.
Okay. Got it.
Right?
Got it.
So what happens is the Old Testament saints at the ascension of Jesus went to heaven, and they come back with Jesus's return. And Jesus will be here for 1,000 years. And at the end of that 1,000 years, everyone on the righteous side will go to New Jerusalem, which is heaven on earth. Everybody on the left side will be judged, and they'll be sent to the lake of fire.
So the difference between, I guess, right now, those that are in hell are suffering spiritual torment, and the difference between then and when Jesus returns is that those that are again in hell will be experiencing both spiritual and physical torment because they will have new bodies. Is that right?
No. The people with bodies will be the people that's on the right side during the Messianic kingdom. The people on the left side are still spirits. And when they're judged, they and their bodies will be cast into the lake of fire.
At the end of 1,000 years.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
So at that time, they will be merged and will experience physical pain, physical torment, as well as spiritual torment. So, what this tells me is, man, I don't want anybody going to hell. I mean, think about that. That's forever. When your body joins up with you, I mean, there is no reprieve.
So again, I'm sorry I'm being so dense, but so you're saying that people who have died and gone to hell because they did not believe in Jesus, people who die today, COVID, they don't believe in Jesus, they go to hell, their spirits are tormented now.
Yes.
But at some time in the future, or they're going to get a body back.
Yes.
And that body and that spirit are going to experience even more torment than they're experiencing now, because it's going to be cast into the lake of fire. Is that
Correct.
right or not?
Yeah.
No. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, Rod, help me out. Run through this with them again. Tell them again for me, will you? You got the voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I got the voice.
Well, this
Okay.
all makes a lot of sense, and that Dan, the way that you've laid this out, it's excellent.
Well, I don't know, but okay. So this is an explanation of Abraham's bosom. You're going to get this. I'm going to send this to you guys, all this anyway. So this will explain to you the righteous side. The key is the Messianic kingdom, 1,000 years. And then we end up in New Jerusalem. Okay. So what do you know?
I got a question.
Yeah.
In the heaven part, Frank sent us the access to the your PowerPoint yesterday.
Okay.
And when you finished up your podcast, which is basically where we are today, the one question that came out was in heaven, where there's 3 heavens. The first heaven is the atmosphere where birds fly. Second is heaven is space, where the sun, moon, and stars are said to be located.
Right.
Both are part of the visible world. And the third heaven is a part unseen invisible world, is where God dwells, and that's the heaven that we will be at before we come back to earth, the new earth, or the new Jerusalem, correct?
Yes, sir.
I don't understand the concept of the first and the second heaven. I've never heard that before.
Those are referred to a number of times in the Bible, in the Old Testament. That was the references that they made about creation, and the idea was to separate those areas. If you recall, now think about this for a minute. They talk about heaven being up there, and they talked about hell, Abaddon, the pit, being down there. So the reference to Sheol and Hades is that it's located in the center of the earth. The reference to the other opposite side is up in the invisible area of the sky. So in the beginning, they could say, well, in their discussions and philosophical debates, they would be able to see the birds flying around, and they'd say, okay, well, that's one area, but I see the birds, I see the cloud, but I don't see God. Okay. So there's an area beyond that. And that area beyond that is the area that God talks to Abraham about count those stars up there, buddy. And we was talking to him about the covenant. Count the stars, and the offspring from you will be more than those. So they were aware there was a second area or second space that they were totally unfamiliar with. I mean, they had during that period of time, they just came up with telescopes, and they were very limited as to what they could do and see. So their knowledge base or proof base didn't extend very far into that. So then how do you explain? I can see the stars, and well, if I see all those, how come I can't see God? Well, there must be another heaven. Are you following me?
I'm with you. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, here is the, to me, the interesting part of that. Jesus ascends, right? So if he's going up and he's going home, then heaven is somewhere up, just like they thought it was.
Okay.
And he disappears somewhere. So that means it's beyond our sight, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. But it must be a place. And it must be a place because Jesus has a body. And that means that it takes space up, that, it's an area of his body is an area. And so here he is sitting at the right hand of the Father today in a physical body somewhere beyond our comprehension of a galaxy. And that's the third heaven.
So in the third heaven, this is where we will go.
Yes.
Our spirit will go there, correct?
Yes.
Just spirit. And
Yeah.
then at some point, and that's the question I have, is when do we receive our glorified body, number one? And number two, can you kind of explain what a glorified body would be?
Okay.
Well, let me do that first. Glorified body is what you read about Jesus had after he rose from the grave. Now, it is a body that no longer functions in the same fashion that your body functions in, because it no longer needs nourishment. So you will eat, but you won't eat because you have to eat. You will eat because you want to eat, because you get to enjoy the blessings of what fruit tastes like, what food tastes like, what desserts taste like. I mean, you get to do that as a blessing and a reward for you, but not as a necessity for you in your glorified body.
So we'd be able to walk through walls.
I'm sorry?
So we'd be able to walk through walls.
Yeah, that was my next thing, is that somehow or another, you're able to dematerialize and then materialize. Okay. Some scholars and philosophers accept the thought that when Jesus came to see his disciples behind locked doors and he appeared to them, that thought concept that they have is that there's another world, another dimension in which Jesus was existing in. Okay. And so all he did was step from that dimension into the third dimension, which is where we are right now. Now, I don't know that, and the Bible doesn't refer to that. That's a philosophy and a scholar, some of the scholars' thought patterns, that there's that possibility that exists, that this unseen world is a parallel dimension that's going on and doing it. And where they get that is they get that originally from the concept that the demons are with you right now and we just don't see them. So if that's the case, then perhaps they're in another dimension and that's why we don't see them. But they see you and they hear you and they know you. So you know what? Satan has a pretty good advantage because he sees you, knows you, and he knows exactly what he needs to dangle in front of you to entice you. Because he sees how you operate. He knows what you get turned on about. Yeah, Norris.
Well, what I've been, am I on? Am I unmuted? Yeah, okay. What I'm going through as I'm listening to the discussion is, I think, you know, we have these mortal bodies, we have these physical bodies, we have these bodies that feel, see, smell, taste, everything else. And we're using human language to try and describe experiences and occurrences that really perhaps can't be described because as we think about these things, we're trying to give them some kind of context that we can relate to in our physicalness. I would probably tend to, right now at least, until I keep studying this, and I'm going to, tend to agree with your philosophers who were talking about a different dimension or something like that, because that seems to offer, at least to my mind, a little bit more reasonable explanation as to how these things can exist at the same time. But I'm fascinated by this. This is just amazing. I agree with Frank that this certainly gives me something that I should really go back and listen to, which I'm sorry I haven't done so far. But and along with listening, look at your charts and everything like that. So
Well,
that's
we are taping this, and so Frank can send that to you whenever it gets finished, and so you can have it where you can play it over again and you can hear our conversation and what was said along with the graphs. So would that help you?
You mean you're taping my stupid comments? Thanks, Frank.
Oh, you're welcome.
My agent is going to send you a release to sign.
Morris, would you prefer that we edit you out?
No.
Put you in a different dimension.
Norris, I don't want to. Norris, I don't want to edit you out. You're the reason why I'm able to sell these things and make money, man. Is that everybody gets to see your picture and hear you.
Excellent, and I'm glad to contribute.
Thanks for being
Okay,
a good
Tom,
team member.
Tom, let's go back to you and your question. I didn't forget it. Did I answer the first part of your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so you kind of get the concept, that there is, and it's just a question of your preference as to where you think it's placed, right? Okay. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've forgotten the second part of your question.
Second part is, at what point do we receive our glorified body?
Oh, okay. Yeah, good. Okay, so here is, now you're getting into an area of great discussion, okay? Because now you're getting into eschatology and end times. So one concept in following, especially Thessalonians, is that we are united with our bodies at the rapture. Okay, so at the split second of time that you're whisked to, if you're still alive now. Wait a minute. Let me qualify that. If you're still alive at the rapture, you are taken up because it says that Jesus comes back. He's in the air, and you'll see him, and you will be called to him, and you will go to him. That means you and your body will go. Okay, so the question is, everybody is to die but once. So if you are raptured with him, and your body and your spirit is taken simultaneously to him, then you don't die. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the terminology and the vernacular that we have. So that now you have to get into what's death. Well, death is the cessation of life, which means you don't breathe, your heart's not beating, so forth and so on, right? And according to Scripture, it's the separation of the spirit and the body. So you're not really separated. So you don't really die. You know, that's part of the problem with identifying the rapture in that fashion. Okay.
Okay.
Now, is there an answer to that? There's probably several hundred speculative answers to that. You know, one is that in a microsecond, you know, you're dead. You know, the idea of whisking you away physically, you know, that could easily happen where while you're being whisked away, your body's unable to function, so you can't breathe, but, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you're carried up into an area where there is no oxygen. Well, there has to be some sort of transformation of that body from being an O2 breather to being a non-O2 breather. So you can say in that transition period, death takes place. You know, I don't know the explanation. I'm not smart enough for that. Okay.
Okay.
Now, it also tells you that the Old Testament saints will be united with their bodies. Now, Old Testament saints are already in heaven, but their bodies are not. So the next step is going to be the raising of the Old Testament saints joining with their spirits. All right.
Okay.
So now what happens is, I don't mean, I'm not talking in terms of Mark. Mark writes in his gospel, immediately, that's a favorite word that he used. I don't mean instantaneously. I'm talking about there's a time frame there, and according to some scriptures, believers, that's a feast for the bride who has now joined Jesus in heaven. So you and your body will be sitting around the dinner table, having a feast, a wedding feast with Jesus. Okay. Then he will return. Now, according to what Revelation tells us, you know, he's bringing the saints with him. And this is when he comes back as victorious, riding the white horse, what it says in Revelation. You recall that?
Yep.
Okay. So now we will be in the millennial period. He's victorious. He defeats the enemies. He casts Satan, is bound. He sends Satan to the abyss. And that's the term it's used. So you now know where the abyss is. He's held there for 1,000 years. And the saints and the non-raptured people that are on earth, we will be existing. Jesus will be on the throne. He's going to be the king. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody remember that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So at the end of the 1,000 years, Satan is released again. He gets to walk the earth. He gets to gather up who he can gather up. Now, as difficult as it is to believe, there will be people on the earth that have lived in this millennial period that still don't believe in Jesus. They'll still be unbelievers. They'll still turn from you. Although there's plenty of evidence, they still won't, because sin will prevail in their hearts. So then, after Satan has roamed the earth and gathered who he can gather, then everyone will be called to the great white throne judgment. And at that great white throne judgment will come the judgment of the unrighteous and the rewards to the righteous. We go to New Jerusalem. They join the dead, unsaved will join their bodies and will be thrown into the lake of fire. Does that help you any?
Yeah, Dan, you had mentioned those who are raptured.
Right.
Thessalonians, when they get to the third heaven, that they will receive the glorified body. How about those, John Schmidt, for example? He would not be raptured. Would he have received his glorified body when he went to heaven, or just his spirit is there and the body comes at the rapture time with everybody else? Or
The
does anyone
spirit
else
is there, and the body will join him. Right.
at the rapture period, or
Right. That's what some believe. Others
Okay.
believe they will join him at the wedding feast of the bride.
okay, all right. So the answer is we're going to find out when our spirit joins up.
We're going to
Am
find
I
out
right?
what?
I said, since there's so many theories, in reality, we're going to find out when our spirit and our glorified body connect, when it happens.
That's if you're dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're alive, you'll know it immediately.
Yeah, I'm kind
Yeah.
of of the belief that at my age, I'm probably going to observe the rapture happening versus during my period of time. That was good. Thank you. You cleared up
I mean,
things that I was. But I do have one last question. Enoch and Elijah did not die.
correct.
So does that justify the theory in Thessalonica that it might be an instant?
No, actually, Jesus and I agree on this. Okay.
So that's a good. You're in good
That's
company.
convenient.
If you recall, during the tribulation period of time, there will be two witnesses that will be called to testify for Jesus on this earth, and they will be killed. They will be killed by the Antichrist. Now, it seems to me, this is why I believe that, it says that everybody is called to die but once. And those guys haven't died. I wonder why not. And
Yeah,
the
okay,
reason
that's
why
good.
is because it says they are prophets, okay? And it says that they instantaneously show up. And that means they didn't go through the birth process and grow up and mature. They were already mature when they showed up.
Yep.
So to me, it makes sense that that would be these two guys. Some scholars think that it's Elijah and Moses, but I have a hard time. The reason why they say it's Elijah and Moses, because Elijah and Moses showed up at the showing of Jesus' glorified body on the mountaintop to his disciples. Remember that?
Mhm.
Peter wanted to build the tent to sacrifice and all. You remember that?
Yep.
Okay. So there, Elijah and Moses showed up there. So because they showed up there, so some scholars think that they'll be the two guys down as prophets that show up during the tribulation. I don't understand that, because they get killed and their bodies stay in laying out there on the ground for everybody to see through the internet for 3 days. And if that's the case, that means Moses died twice, and I don't get that.
And so leaves Enoch.
So Enoch and Elijah makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to take all that time, but I appreciate it.
No, as a matter of fact, I did a lesson on Enoch, and I just didn't record it because they found books of Enoch 1, 2, and 3 in Qumran, and so they actually First Enoch, the book in First Enoch, is called The Watchers, and that's the story of these angels that are in Tartarus, and they're referencing they're having sex with women on the earth to pollute the bloodline. It did not. Book of Enoch is not in the Bible, obviously, but it is a place there. Enoch, by the way, did not write the book of Enoch. It's a pseudogram. It is a pseudonym that someone used for his name to be accepted. So they wrote that. But that's a frequent occurrence at that time in the Old Testament, especially.